Yeah, welcome to another episode of the Racer X Exhaust podcast brought to you by Yoshimura, 65 years of four-stroke research and development. They've got everything you need with exhaust system work when it comes to four-stroke ATVs or dirt bikes or street bikes, or get a set for everything you have. It'd be awesome. And really cool also to have Racer X brand. We still have the podcast t-shirt, 20% off your order. Just type in exhaust in all capital letters, and you can get the shirt and anything else you want with the discount. Love it. And Racer X Illustrated, I am scrambling right now because we are putting together another issue of the magazine, which has to go to the printer early next week. I always recommend you subscribe to the magazine because everything in it is different than what you'll see on Racer X social media or racerxonline.com. Totally different info, and it's a lot of work. So reward us for that. Or reward yourself because we have something groundbreaking coming to magazine subscribers soon. When you see it, you're going to say, oh my God, this is it. This is the solution. This is all media. This is where they need to go. But we've got it first. That's all I'm going to say. But if you subscribe, you're going to be in on the ground floor. So you should be pumped on this. So that's Racer X Illustrated, new issue coming soon. Subscribe now, racerxonline.com/subscribe. We also have a live show, another live show for sure we're going to do in Denver the night before the Denver Supercross. That's Friday, April the 12th. That is actually my birthday. I won't tell you which birthday number that is for me, but it is going to be one heck of a party. We've done these in Vegas. We did one before Anaheim 1. We'll probably do a few more. We're working on maybe Indy or Seattle, but we know we already have Denver locked in. So if you're anywhere near Denver, if you're going to the Supercross, hang out with us at the Oriental Theater. Go to theorientaltheater.com. Get your tickets, $20 for general admission. VIP is $40. VIP and meet and greet with us is $60, and the event starts at 7 o'clock, but the meet and greet is 6, so we'll get you in early if you're a meet and greeter for $60. Then the show will go from 7 to 9. You can find stuff about it on our website, or you can go to theorientaltheater.com, or you can go to Steve's janky pulpmx.com site. Myself, Steve Mathis, Jason Thomas, Chris Kiefer will be bench racing. We'll be taking your questions. We're going to get a bunch of guests. Would not be surprised at all to get Villopoto there again because Yamaha's on board with these events now, helping us out. Also, it's presented by Performance Cycle. So thanks to Yamaha and Performance Cycle for backing it, and thanks to you for coming. We'll see you in Denver and maybe Indy, maybe Seattle, maybe Vegas, maybe everywhere. Well, I'll just come to your house and announce the race for you. Just pay me. So those are our promotions. And speaking of promotions, let's talk about this week's podcast. I have tracked down the man that for 18 years, his sole job was to get more fans to go to Supercross races, to follow Supercross, to watch Supercross, and by the way, to keep the existing fans engaged. Denny Hartwig was the PR man for the series for 18 years. Now, before him, it was a one and done often in this position. That's how hard the work is. That's how stressful it is. You are never going to reach the top of the mountain. When you're promoting a niche sport like this, you can always make it bigger, but are you ever going to make it big enough? Probably not possible. So it's a thankless job in many ways, but Denny hung in there for a long time, and those of us that went to the races for a long time, especially those of us that worked in media like myself, really became tight with Denny. Then in 2016, he moved on to a new job. He now does public relations for Chicagoland Speedway, which holds a NASCAR race. So we've kept in touch. We're still friends, and we often compare and contrast what we've learned from this sport, Supercross and Motocross, to what goes on in NASCAR, which goes on all the time. There are tons of conversations about that with people trying to make this sport bigger. Why isn't it as big as NASCAR? How do we get more fans? How do we get more people to watch on TV? Well, Denny actually lived it. Everyone in this sport at some point has uttered the phrase, I just want to grow this sport. I want to grow the sport. I want to grow the sport, grow the sport, grow the sport. Denny is one of the few whose actual sole job was to try to do it. Now look, this is difficult to do. The first thing I feel people love to do is blame the riders and then maybe blame the promoters. They should do more. They should sound better. They should promote themselves better. But as you'll find out, there is a lot that goes on that you probably didn't even know about. When Denny was doing PR, press day at the races was Thursday, and often the riders were at the stadium super early, like 5 a.m. on a Thursday morning, to try to get segments in on each city's local morning newscast. So you probably didn't even know this was going on. This wasn't info that we were putting on Racer X. It didn't really apply to us. You know, it was a factory Honda guy and like the local news anchor, get him out on a CRF 70F or whatever the heck they called them during these years and get him to do donuts on the start stretch. And maybe that was a 30-second spot on the local morning news, and maybe that made a few people want to come to a race or buy a dirt bike or think about dirt bikes. And maybe they went to a race 3 years later because they saw that segment. That's what Denny did. The riders really worked pretty darn hard, and surprising to me, I mean, NASCAR is a full promotional machine. But Denny has told me many times that actually these Supercross athletes, in some ways, were easier to work with or better to work with. NASCAR guys have their upside. Supercross guys have their upside. NASCAR has its downsides. Supercross has its downsides. It's all just a big mix of what's good and what's bad. But my overarching point from learning about NASCAR and talking to Denny is that you can't just say, dude, these riders, these teams, if they just did more, the sport would be huge. Because ultimately, this is a niche sport, and it's always going to be a niche sport. And you'll discover that at the end of this podcast, we realized this. Pretty much everyone has held a basketball or a football in their hands at some point in their life, and everyone's driven a car. Exposure to motorcycles? Well, dude, the Motorcycle Industry Council just recently announced that motorcycle ownership in the United States is at an all-time high because 8% of Americans own motorcycles now. 8%! So you're selling a sport that 92% of the people don't really even have an appreciation for. And by the way, the 8%, that's all types of motorcycles. That doesn't mean they've ridden through whoops or even ridden in the dirt or anything like that. That might mean they have a darn scooter. So that's an uphill battle to make this sport bigger. I often have to check myself to realize we're lucky the sport is as big as it even is because we are absolutely a niche. Honestly, we're a niche of a niche. We're a niche of the motorcycle market, which is a niche of the world. So let's get some insight from Denny about the work he did in Supercross, how it's going now, and there is still a tie-in because Chicagoland Speedway, recently Ryan Villopoto, wink wink, hit up some NASCAR drivers and decided, maybe I could have a pit bike race at the Chicagoland Speedway NASCAR event. Ooh, that would be fun. I wonder how that idea was hatched. I guess Villopoto just randomly decided that on his own, right? It wasn't like there's any connection with Villopoto knowing someone that does PR for that racetrack. I don't want to give away too much here. Let's have a nice conversation. Denny was in town a couple weeks ago because it was NASCAR Media Week here in Charlotte, so I went down and met him, hung out with him a few times, and as we were having these conversations, I think we were at a restaurant, and while we did this, whatever. Yeah, it was a restaurant. And I said, dude, I'm going to start recording this. This is such good info. Do you mind publishing it? And he said he doesn't care. So as usual on these podcasts, there's background noise. I try to make these things as real and raw as possible. Here's Denny and I talking Supercross, talking media, talking growing the sport. But first, this. Podcast. 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 Yeah, okay, let's get Denny here. Like I said, we were hanging out at NASCAR Media Week. We kept talking media. We kept talking Supercross media, NASCAR media, and we stumbled into this conversation, and then I decided to record it. And we actually start with Denny. I always make fun of him for this. He had a college scholarship to Purdue University for wrestling. And never once did he wrestle anyone in a Supercross. I was just waiting for him to get mad at some rider for no showing at a press event and then like locking him into a figure four leg lock and making him tap or something like that. So we start this conversation with some tales of the college wrestling days, which included the fact that he was a classmate of Drew Brees, who was also, he's a famous NFL quarterback for those of you that don't pay attention to stick and ball sports. Yeah. Drew Brees and Denny are the same age. They went to the same college at the same time, and they'd often see each other in the weight room and stuff like that. But for some reason, Denny never used his athletic experience to leverage the Supercross riders. He probably should have, because they probably just thought he was a loser because he was making them go to the stadiums early. Anyway, here's Denny. So Drew Brees was in your college when you were there?
Yeah, so a lot of times we played, we'd be in the gym or usually the weight room. Those guys would be around, and
yeah.
They were all 3 times our size except Drew, and he would just, at the time when I was there, Mike Allstott lived across the hall from me, so he was as big as anybody.
Yeah.
And so we hung out with him. Mm-hmm. One of his roommates I grew up wrestling with, so it wasn't like they were they did their stuff, we did our stuff, and we were all kind of like just friends. I didn't know the guy was going to go on to be a big superstar, but I think it's awesome.
But you never used your, hey, I was an athlete, I went to college. You have a scholarship, right?
Yeah, so
you never used that.
Yeah, but like my wrestling, I would say, was really impacted by the Title IX stuff. The year I was going in, and so there were some cutbacks. So I did. My dad was smart enough and diligent enough to do some things that would kind of help out with a lot of that stuff.
I know, but why did you never, when you needed a rider to show up for a media session at 5 a.m., say, look, dude, I was an athlete. I understand the pressures. I had to run around in gym bags and chew gum to lose weight. I know what it's all about. You never used that.
That's a good point, Weege. Maybe I
should you have?
In my head, I knew, like, to get the job done. I think that was another point of why I enjoyed working in this sport, not coming from it, is that I always knew that in wrestling, the guys that you need a little bit of talent, and the guys that would take it to the darkest place as far as hard work and maybe lonely or just doing all the stuff and the boring stuff.
We're weird.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that nobody wanted to do.
Yeah.
Like, they're gonna either be the best or they're gonna give themselves the best shot to be put in that spot. And when I used to go to California and stay with Tony Gardillo when Ryan Dungey and him were working together, they would I would stay at Tony's house and I would see what Ryan Dungey did, and it reminded me of like a wrestler. And it's like, if anybody saw, if anyone said, I want to be Ryan Dungey, I'd say, you should come spend a week here and see how boring this is, because this dude is either busting his butt all day and eating the most boring food and sleeping, like going to bed really early, and it's not a picnic. And that's what I enjoyed, because there's a parallel between those two sports that kind of kept me around. But as far as getting these guys to do more stuff, going back to some of the stuff we've talked about, I think...
Hang on, that's my wife calling. She's going to call back in an hour. Go ahead. As far as getting these guys to do more stuff.
I think I've always been one of those guys where it's do whatever it takes to get the job done. So, but I never told those guys that. Maybe I should have. But for the most part, they were pretty good. It took a little bit of arm bending with a couple of them, but they always got it. And what we've been talking about the last couple of days, I've grown to appreciate the generosity that those guys in the teams were with their time.
Well, yeah, because the sport isn't as big as anyone wants it to be. You spent how many years? 15? 18 to try to grow it. And everybody that's involved with Supercross and Motocross thinks it's the greatest thing ever. So it's like, why are we not the biggest sport ever if it's the coolest sport ever? There are tireless efforts. And as easy as it is to say, if these riders would just do this, or if these riders just do that, I feel like they're pretty good. I feel like they try.
They really do, and I think some of it is they try. There's generations that, I guess if the 16-year-old kid that's coming up knows that Chad Reed did press day every Thursday, they may go, I can't wait to do press day.
I don't know about that, but I feel like if they're told, they might not be pumped, but they do it.
They just do it. They're good. And, now that I've been at Chicagoland Speedway going into my 4th year, NASCAR has a little bit of a different structure on having the availability of drivers.
Yeah.
I look back and, those Thursdays when we'd have 2 to 3 teams.
Yeah.
And other guys begging to come in and do press day. Now, a lot of those guys wanted to just ride the track.
Yes, they want to track accidents.
They weren't like, all right, I'm really working on my media metrics this week, and I want to grow my Q score.
Yeah.
So how do we get on ABC in Anaheim, and then LA Times, and then it wasn't like that. So I think...
Can you tell us what racer dad and sons were most willing to do the most press?
I would say my man, Tony Alessi.
Oh, yeah.
Tony Alessi is a guy that is probably controversial, but I can't say enough good things about him. I think he he was all in.
For media purposes?
He was all in for everything. Let's do it all. Let's do it right. And I want to be. And the guy was 10 minutes early, and 10 minutes early was 10 minutes late in his mind. And I enjoyed working with him, his sons, any of the guys that he when he was the manager of the team or whatever his role was, he was always really fun to deal with.
But that was because they got track access. But in general, I feel like, even Villopoto. Villopoto was maybe the highest heights. You were there for Carmichael and Reed and Stewart. Villopoto reached the highest heights. The thing I always give Villopoto credit for, he didn't actually want to do any of it. I don't know if he actually wanted to race. He definitely didn't want to train. He definitely didn't want to do media stuff. But he would make himself do what he did not want to do because he knew that's what was part of the job. He did do it.
And that goes back to what I was saying. I think for all of these motocross or supercross guys, they all have to do what they don't like. And they have to live the word. Now I say this very loosely, but live a very boring, bad life just to get to where they have to take themselves in a dark, deep place to accomplish what they want, because it's all about sacrifice, and that's what they did. And if you look at, when Ricky Carmichael started doing this stuff, he was a little chubby, and then when he started kicking everyone's butt, he looked like a prize fighter. It's the same story all the way down the road. And when you give up and it's everything else in life. If you sacrifice a bunch of stuff and you give up certain things, you're always going to be better. That's just, unfortunately, that's how it works.
Right. But you found on the NASCAR side, they do an over-the-top job of promotion. I always say that they change so much and they react so much they almost go too far. Like, whatever the fans want, we will give it to you. Where Motocross and Supercross pretty much just does what they do. They don't make huge changes. They just keep putting out the same product, the same idea, and hopefully one of these years it becomes huge. But it's not like a night and day difference of, oh man, these drivers, these teams, so much better to work with.
Yeah, it's more of, there's a lot more structure, I would say.
Yeah.
So in NASCAR, it's not, let's use an example, when Ryan Dungey didn't want to do something and he always wanted to do everything. I could always go talk to his dad, Troy. I never really had to do that with him. But like, if there's a guy that didn't want to do something, and I always had the responsibility of getting it done, whether it was, hey, we need USA Today to do this, and this racer's not willing to talk to him. I had to find a way to make that happen. Okay. So if the first stop was the PR person, the next stop may be the man friend, the girlfriend, the wife. I would find every way to make it happen. Because
you did this.
Yeah, because there was no... the people that I reported to, they didn't care. They wouldn't take... There wasn't like it's all right. And so I think with NASCAR, there's a little bit more structure and a little bit more demands placed on those guys. That, like, if they can do it, they'll do it. If they can't, they can't.
You can't go to the girlfriend and wiggle them out.
No. I wish I could, but that does not happen.
Is it just because, look, if you're a NASCAR driver, you have a team, and you have all these legit mainstream sponsors, then there's a track, then there's a series, then there's like the Chevy or Ford or whoever, Toyota, whoever builds your car. It just seems like in motocross, maybe luckily everything's small enough where it's like, I don't even know who I'm doing this for. I'll just do it.
It's maybe everything's not so, and I don't work on the team side with NASCAR, but I don't think everything is contract driven. Yeah. Where like a couple of these guys will do some solids on the side, or there's not as many bro deals that get done. Right. And
it's black or white.
Yes. I have 3 appearances for this person. Yeah. I'm doing those 3, and they're going to be here and here. Yeah, you can't break off a little side favor.
Dude, I get people all the time. Like, it's very easy when you're inside it like I am to say, like, and look, you've had riders blow you off, I'm sure, and let you down, I'm sure. As soon as people want to start piling on, I say to myself, no, I'm not going to do it. I feel like the riders are pretty darn good. They're pretty open, they're pretty honest. You can send text to them, which I'm sure is not getting this job done in your sport. Like, you got to work through people. They're insulated. can still shoot a rider a text and get a response, which is not normal for most sports. And that's today's riders. If anyone wants to have revisionist history, that's fine. But, dude, I remember being there when you had Stu and Carmichael and Reed, and it was the most serious, secretive, gnarly, tense, cut-it-with-a-knife atmosphere you could ever have with those guys. It was so gnarly back then.
And I think when those guys were in their prime, it was as much of it was they didn't want to take time away from doing what they had to do, because these guys do have to spend a lot. I will give them a lot of credit, because their time away from media and away from all that other stuff, that also takes away from time from their success. And if their success is built on dollars, well, media stuff is going to take away from that.
Right.
And so those guys, I would always say that they didn't really blow off a whole lot of stuff. Yeah. But it wasn't as easy as saying, "Hey, meet me at this place and we'll go do this." Yeah. It was kind of you had to grind it a little bit, but they were always, I think, really good. And I do think that there's something to be said about how generous they are with their time.
Yeah, but dude, they were gnarly back then. They were still gnarly. Yeah. They were so afraid, I feel like, of letting their guard down. If it looks like I'm not working today or training today, the competition's going to get a leg up on me. And I'm sure you had some situations where they were hanging out with each other, which they probably didn't want to do while we were like prepping for an event, right?
The uncomfortable silence.
Oh, yeah.
It was always, those guys did a really good job at being around each other, and inside it's just like, man, that's probably one of the biggest things with individual sports, especially individual sports where there's money involved. Okay. So not only is that guy could crush your ego and beat you at something, he may take a couple $100,000 out of your pocket.
That's right.
That's one of the things that's different about this. It's like, that's a lot of money. I mean, so if you're around those guys, I mean, I don't care what they say. They may be cool, but there's no way that you could ever be around those guys. It's the money component. And I'm not a greedy person or anything like that, but I get it. You may be able to help put your sister or brother through college if you win a certain race and you beat a guy, and if that's the guy there that's stopping it, it blurs the lines. And maybe there's bigger people that would be able to put that to the side, but I don't know. That's a hard nut to crack.
Dude, do you remember that year where the kickoff season press conference in Toronto in December? Because we used to have races in Canada before Anaheim won. And you did it in a children's hospital.
Yes.
Which was, okay, we had a stage and they had a PR room, so it seemed kind of normal. It was not normal, bro. We had it at a children's hospital instead of Anaheim 1.
Right. Yeah, it was a little bit different. That was a weird time, and I think I will say I appreciate those guys going the extra mile and being cool with all that stuff, and the philanthropy and all that good stuff was really cool. They were really good, and they were good at understanding that this wasn't the Anaheim 1 big stage. Yeah. But they were going to make the sacrifice, and they put in their time.
But I had to get in a taxi with Chad Reed and James Stewart when they were at peak hating each other to get from our hotel to wherever the heck the hospital where we were having the press conference. And it was so weird and so odd. It was crazy back then, but they still did it. They went to a children's hospital when they could have been training. And if anyone lost the race that weekend, they were probably going to get blamed for not working hard enough, and their team was going to come down to them and the fans. But they still did do it, even though I'm sure they really did not want to.
No, and hey, I didn't know if you packed a referee shirt
it was gnarly
for that cab ride, but yeah, that's a interesting spot to be in. Yeah, and it's awkward. Dude,
you put it on me. You said you got to host a press conference, and since you're at their hotel, bring them. And I was like, I have to bring Chad Reed and James Stewart to a hospital.
You did a lot of good favors for me back in the day, Weege. You still do, but yeah, I think that I would like to sit down with those guys now. Maybe we do a future podcast. And
all right.
Hear the mutual. They have to have tons of respect for one another.
Will they have a beer with each other and say, you know what, or a cup of coffee, and say, hey, I understand you were competitive and I was competitive, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's, when growing up wrestling, I would even in high school, me and my best friend, we had a mat in my garage, and he had a pool. And we would beat the crap out of each other. And as soon as that was over with, we'd go swim at his parents' pool, and it was like nothing ever happened until the next morning. And it was like you had like that hour time where it's like,
really,
we're going to put this friendship aside, and then we're going to go swimming.
I mean, I really think that's what it was. Like, if now, what I found, so in Anaheim 1 this year, they didn't want to give us an hour of one-on-one time with today's current riders. So they brought out the previous Anaheim champions from like the 80s and 90s, while today's riders went out and prepared to go ride. And these old dudes were so pumped to hang out with each other, let alone get a little bit of press and media and attention, which I haven't had in a long time. And I remember asking Johnny O'Mara and Jeff Ford, I'm like, well, I guess while you were battling, you must have got along pretty well because you're cool today. And they're like, no. Words came to blows many times, but now he's the only other guy I know who knows what I went through. Like, we're one of the few people on Earth that can understand each other and what we went through.
And when you say few people on Earth, I mean, I think this is a niche sport. It's unlike any other thing.
Yeah.
And when we were talking earlier, these guys, it's taken me a year. I've learned a lot since I've stepped away, just because before it was such a grinding, demanding job, leaving Wednesday, coming home Sunday, doing it all over again. And I realized, like, these guys they spend so much time, like, training off the bike, working on their diet, they test the motorcycle, and then they have to ride the motorcycle. There's a lot that goes into it. And aside from all of that, there's a chance that these guys can't walk if something goes wrong.
I mean, you've had very close friends get jacked up. I know you and Ernesto Fonseca were buds, and you saw it firsthand.
Yeah, and it's like, I think these guys go through so much physically, but also mentally, and I guarantee you there aren't human beings that go, I just broke my femur, but I'll be back on the bike, and I'm going to get the best doctor, and I'm going to do this and that. And people aren't wired that way. So I've learned I have a whole lot of respect for what, like, these guys, the badassness and, the tough guy side of these guys. I really appreciate it. I think there's something special there. But I think when all those old school guys get together, I mean, back then the money might have not have been there.
Right.
And there was and it was maybe they were racing for a little bit of money.
Yeah.
But
they were racing for what seemed like a lot of money then.
Yes, but more it was like the pride and the maybe a little notoriety, but it was like, man, they all laid it on the line, and they were like, this is what I have. I'm going to put every ounce of my focus into this.
Okay, so you have this pit bike thing coming up. So ironically, you're back in with your old group. You might have a pit bike race at Chicagoland Speedway with Ryan Villapoto, who I would think, oh, you and Villapoto, you've worked on many media projects. This is no big deal, but it is, even you've realized it's an entirely different guy now.
It's he's not somebody that, like, I would have said, like, hey, we were buddies, or we were, like, trading texts. I mean, I wasn't. Yeah.
But you probably did a lot of stuff with him.
I did, and he we know. He liked to drag his feet. He made it difficult. No, and I think he had fun with that stuff.
Yes.
I think he enjoyed it. But this whole thing, it's turning into something, and there's going to be more to come on it. I really hope that we could put everything together. And him and Jimmy Johnson started talking about it. The numbers socially were really good.
Yep. And
some of the names that were involved, I mean, Jeremy McGrath chimed in, Carmichael, Chad Reed.
Yep.
Even Ken Roxon said he wanted to race, but I have a feeling he's got to do his day job.
This is in June.
But the notion was cool, and I think some of those guys, maybe it'll be fun. I'm just trying to do something different and connect the two audiences, the guys from Supercross and come to NASCAR, and maybe there's some guys that are on the fence that would not otherwise go to a NASCAR race. Just come on out and have a good time. Okay, so you've been at Chicagoland Speedway for 4 years now, you say. Mm-hmm. Is there stuff that NASCAR does that you're like, whoa, this is so advanced, this is so much better, they're 50 years ahead? I would say some of the structure stuff, some of the technology stuff, maybe. I think maybe there's a lot more resources, knowing that comparing the team at Feld and the team at NASCAR, obviously the structure is a little bit different. So I think that there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
I think when I have opportunities, I'll share certain things with Dave Prater, or just give him Dave's a good friend of mine, and I think a lot of them. And when I have time to talk to him, I'll not that I don't have time to talk to him, but I'll say, hey, give him a little suggestion here or there. But I don't think there's anything. One thing I will say, though, is when I started here, coming from Supercross, I think a lot of the people in Supercross thought NASCAR was, hey, this is how everything should be. And there's really a lot to be said about what Supercross has as far as the loyal fan base, the people, the family, the community. The way, the biggest component is the way that KTM and, pardon me for not knowing off the top of my head, Honda has like the little kids programs that give kids a real life opportunity to race or ride a bike, simulate the activity that these big name guys are doing, where it's hard to do that in NASCAR. I don't know if NASCAR has, do you bring little go-karts out that 5-year-old kid? I don't know, man. Maybe that's a little dangerous. So I think the Supercross has done a really feeding the pipeline and keeping those little bikes affordable and getting them, the pipeline of getting them in is I wouldn't say it's as easy as football and baseball where you're just buying a glove and a ball or a bat, but I think they've done a really good job at introducing the sport to people.
Okay, so just give me a rundown of the work you put in that most people don't know when you're a PR guy for Supercross. If fans want to say sports should be bigger, it could be bigger, they just need to promote it. Dude, you were working your balls off to try to make this happen. Like, as you said, Wednesday leaving for the race, like Wednesday through Friday was nothing but promotion.
It was hard because we would go into markets where let's use Anaheim as an example. Yeah. They've got the LA Kings, the Angels, the Dodgers. So you're for one competing against all of those other stick and ball sports that have the viewers of the TV stations and the readers of the newspapers. They have, there's an obligation for the news outlets to provide them updates and all that. Right. So now we have to come in and squeeze our way into those and say we're relevant. Yeah. And so that was always tough. I think the spectacle of jumping 80 feet or 100, whatever the number is on the triples, doing that was a spectacle. Bringing in 500 truckloads of dirt into a pristine football or baseball stadium that doesn't happen every day. So some of that stuff you can make a news story out of it, but the sports story, as cool as it was hard to get those guys on board. On board that weekend. Yeah. And we did it, but on board for the rest of the year, probably because it was like, hey, we have to cover the Dodgers and all these other teams.
Wait, so your goal was to get the local press to also cover Minneapolis or Detroit or wherever you went?
Yes, and it was a concerted effort that we did our best to make sure they had the highlights, they had the press release, we gave them generic B-roll, we did that, and I get it. It'll never be like that. It'll never be
baseball.
It'll never, no, they just can't. It's a different animal, and if anyone ever thinks it'll be that way, call me short-sighted, but it'll never be that way. Right. This sport is niche, and it has a lot of good, but it needs to know its place. Yeah. And so when you have these big human interest stories like James Stewart when he came out, that was massive. Yeah. That was the biggest thing that will ever happen to that sport. Yep. And that may be, take that how you want, that'll be the biggest thing that'll happen. And so there's always going to be these niche kind of blips on the radar where it like hits a big deal. So it's not going to be in every single newscast. You're not going to turn on SportsCenter. When the guys at SportsCenter, who I had a great relationship with, I had a great relationship with them, and they would tell me a bunch of different things, but the resounding interest from them was if you have a bike on fire or you have a spectacular crash, that's what we want to see.
Okay.
Now, to the niche people and probably the audience listening to this, that makes zero sense. Now, to the average mom or Joe Football or Joe Plumber listening, okay, wow, that was spectacular. Probably a lot of the stuff you see at the X Games. Unfortunately, when someone has a big crash, that's what people see.
Weren't you actually there when Weston Pike and Vince Friese got into it? Weren't you still there?
Yes.
The biggest thing you ever had happen?
I was there, and it was, and this will provide some context. Okay. So I was there, and I was talking to certain people to try to work the whole, hey, we got, because people were interested. Like mainstream media were interested.
Okay.
And they were talking about that. And I was like, let's get these two in one place. And unfortunately, that would have sold. I don't know which party.
You mean have them do
an interview,
oh, really?
Be there.
Yeah.
I think maybe a little bit of the UFC trash talking stuff probably could have helped a little bit.
Okay.
But I think that was something, unfortunately, that's what drew the interest. But if that's what you have to jump on, and that's the angle,
right?
Because mainstream America is never going to go, Chad Reed just went through those whoops faster than anybody in the world. Most people don't know what whoops are.
Okay.
They call them moguls, and if it doesn't mean anything. And, to someone that, like, if you have to sit and break it down and tell people, do you know how crazy it is what that kid just did?
Yeah.
They don't have time for it. And they certainly don't have time for it when there's a million other things going on in social media and whatever else.
We'll get to the changing ground of social media in a second here, but first I want to say, did you tell the riders what to say, how to act, or did you just bring them to the media, try to get them in front of them, and let them be themselves? How did that part work? Did you train them in any way?
So it was some of the guys were really good at it.
Yeah.
And, the seasoned guys.
Yeah.
Some of the guys, you'd kind of nudge them.
Yeah.
And other guys, you would tell the reporter, hey, this is what I want you to ask this guy. And so... Because
you had to help it go.
Right, because if we're on a morning show, which is always the biggest bang for our buck in a market, sports, the newscast is 27 minutes. You get like 3 minutes of sports.
Okay.
We may get 20 seconds. Hey, Supercross is in town at St. Louis. Go to the Edward Jones Dome and blah, blah. So you'd do a morning show, and you'd get, I'd say, maybe 10 minutes worth of coverage. Well,
and this is, first of all, just explain these morning shows. So you'd be there at the stadium what time?
Sometimes you get there at 4 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes, you just get there, you set up and make sure everything's ready. And
you try to get like one of their local people like on a motorcycle or something like that?
Yeah, and the guys would be riding, and it's basically an informational piece. Just say it's like the Home and Garden show. So
it's very mainstream, but you found that was the best bang for your buck.
In its top level. I think a NASCAR guy just walked in here. We'll talk about that in a minute.
In a second. That's why we're here. We went to lunch at a place that named everything after NASCAR people.
Yeah, but
that's how we roll.
So, anyways, those shows were kind of top line, and they would basically tell people what's going on around town. So if you had kids and family, and the tickets were affordable, and these guys were doing such spectacular things, and it was cool. And I think selling that vibe in Indianapolis is way different than selling it in California, where you go to Anaheim 1, and I'm not a cool guy, but I know that like everybody that goes to that thing is really, there's just a cool vibe, and it's like the place to be, and there's something for everybody. It's a long event, but it seems like it goes by in 10 minutes because there's so much to do. And
right. So you were there at 4 in the morning. When you said to a top rider, you had to be here at 5 or whatever time in the morning they had to be there, would they do it? Or were they like, no?
Well, I think I would pick and choose my battles with a lot of those guys. Right. So, Ricky was always good at saying, we kind of had a thing where I'd say, I'm never going to ask you to do something that's not as good for you as it is for me.
Yeah.
And so when we would do big shows, I think all those guys got it in Anaheim.
Okay.
When we do KTLA and those guys got it there. Or if we were doing stuff in New York, they got it. And what I really, looking back, I really appreciate those guys, how much they embraced their sport. And they kind of came together. And I would always say that, however, if Ricky Carmichael's the top guy, whatever he does to promote this thing helps the last place guy's mechanic. Whoever those guys are. And so like you're an advocate for the everybody that's in those pits, everybody that's working in this industry. And so I've got a lot of respect for those guys that would do all of that because they were working on behalf of a massive, massive group. So when those guys were getting up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning doing this stuff, they were essentially helping a ton of people.
You could get championship level guys to do that though?
They'd know the market. They would know the market.
Depending on the market. But it wasn't no matter what.
Correct.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was really cool is when the guys would understand how the whole thing worked. Because we were talking earlier, I think a lot of the guys are like, press day. That means ride the bike.
Yeah, ride the track.
Ride the track.
Yeah.
Get everything worked out, and that's going to give me an advantage. Well, when I started to appreciate these guys saying, all right, we're here.
Yeah.
We need to do this, and this is why. That was kind of cool to me. And then there were also, I always had to answer to people in my job.
Okay.
A pretty demanding leadership group. So when we would have a press day, and nobody would show up, certain guys would start questioning me. Where's the media?
Oh, okay.
And as much as I appreciated that, I was like, man, you have no idea how hard I tried to get these guys out here.
Yeah.
There could be a fire across town. There could have been a big trade with the local basketball team. You never know. I think there was a time when we were with Chad Reed in Phoenix, that when they raced at Bank One or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
They Chad was talking to all these reporters, and all of them picked up their phone all at the same time. And that some idiot snuck out to the local Air Force base and was driving a car around there and causing some trouble. And it was like, all right, see you later. So like,
that was it.
In that, I went from having the best press day to the worst press day because someone decided to be an idiot.
Right. So here's Chad Reed, who's dedicated every second of his life to this quest to be the best in his chosen field. And because some rando drove on an Air Force base, nobody cares.
Yeah, and so like
we're done with your story.
And so if you're Chad, you're like, I came here a day early. I'm giving up my time. And now this is what I get. Now, that's a good situation because it wasn't me telling Chad, this is what happened.
Right.
It was all of those news guys saying this, like they all picked up their phone literally at the same time.
Right.
I don't know if he remembers it or not, but it was like, all right, so I have a third-party endorsement.
I know, but when you're so deep in it like those guys are, you have to hope that they actually see it that way. Because look, when you go to all these races like you and like I still do, and you did, they start to eventually think the world does revolve around them to some degree because every one of their peer group thinks of them as the man. And the fact that they're not 1/100th of what Kobe Bryant was in his peak at that time is something that seems to escape them at times.
Yeah, it sure does. And I think there's a group of guys that maybe if they got into this and they surrounded themselves with different people, I think they'd go a lot farther. Yeah. And that's, I know it's definitely detrimental to them because they're just as human as you and I. And I used to tell some of the guys, like, listen, if you're going to give me a hard time, you think you're that big of a deal, let's go down to the local mall and let's see who recognizes you. And, you know,
exactly.
It's
these guys fly commercial.
They're waiting for the gate for their airline like anybody else, and they're not getting mobbed.
Right. That's just how it is. I'm not saying what their skill set, their trade, they're badasses. That's good. It's no better or worse than someone that's really good at painting something.
Yeah.
But you're just everybody has their own skill set.
Right.
And so you got to be
no different than Tom Brady.
Yeah. Right. Humble and kind of know like I'm good at this, but I'm still a human being. I'm putting my pants on the same way as everybody else.
When you had to get them to do stuff, does that go through them? Does that go through their dad, an agent, a team, a sponsor? You mentioned girlfriends before. Like, how do you even make this happen?
You kind of you start with the easiest path, and sometimes it's the agent or the team PR person, and then other times you have to kind of go a little bit deeper. And I think that the deeper you get, sometimes we would never want to piss anybody off, but we're just trying to. This is good for everybody.
Yes.
So when we do things like this, it was for, I would say, the whole sport. It's good probably for the one rider that's going to get highlighted, but everybody's going to benefit from this. And so it was always a concerted effort. But you never really, there wasn't a straight, clear path on how to get certain things done.
You were trying to figuring it out. Basically.
Figure it out. I'll give you. I keep this detailed plan. In my pocket. I keep it on my personal laptop or probably Google Drive or some bullshit like that. Anyways, when we first partnered with Fox Sports, the weeks, months leading into that for Anaheim 1 race, we wanted to be on a couple of their what they called shoulder programming. We would ask, nothing was happening. Well, the day of the Anaheim 1 press conference, when I'm running around like an idiot, and the opportunity comes up, and I'm like, oh my God, I've got to, and I'm not curing cancer here, but I'm just trying to figure out how to do a couple things.
This is your job, so it's important. It's okay.
So I'm trying to make the press conference run smoothly, and then find a way to get to, I forgot what Fox Sports show it was, but we were trying to make this happen. Now, during the course of the press conference, we worked out this whole detailed plan where we were going to get a helicopter, and I think Pete Fox was instrumental in this, and Steve Astafin and Chad Reed. All of them were kind of working with me. We're going to get a helicopter to land at Angel Stadium, pick Chad up, fly him up there, drop him off at a location, had a car pick him up, take him there, and then reverse all of that. And I'm like,
oh my gosh.
Yes. And as I stated earlier, I had a pretty demanding leadership group. And that was a big weight off my shoulders.
Yes, this is going to happen.
See? And that plan, it's a lot more in-depth because there was also hair, makeup, a bunch of other shit mixed into that.
Wow, okay. And
so we had it all figured out. Sure as shit, the wind was so bad.
Oh, come on.
The whole thing kind of came crumbling down. I don't know if the helicopter couldn't fly, but it couldn't happen. And it was powers beyond our control.
Right.
And so when we came to Chad and we said, and I knew the answer, and if I was Chad, I would have said, no, this is stupid. I said, hey, is there any way we're going to be taking them in a limo after Anaheim 1 the press conference at 3 o'clock from Anaheim up to LA in a limo. And then he'd probably get home at like 10 o'clock at night. Well, this is the biggest weekend of the year for him. So it didn't happen, but some of that stuff, you just had to like maneuver your way around and try to make things happen.
You were always then fighting the uphill battle. You're always fighting the uphill battle, and it's so easy when you're within it to think. As an example, last weekend's race on NBC Sports was not on live, and most fans are like, WTF, why is it not on live? Well, there's another car race that they already had a contract with that's also on live at the same time. There's no way around that. So for you guys, that's what you're always fighting. Both this limo helicopter thing, or this dude gets onto the Air Force Base, or whatever it was. It's in our world, we start thinking we're the most important thing out there. But you were always the second or third option. All these outlets.
Yes, and I think the story was always good.
Yeah.
But it was the demand, the availability for all of the stuff that we just kind of had to go. I would say I would pride myself on this, that like I was opportunistic and I would have to jump on shit, and it would always be last minute. And if it meant having people stay in my room, like I'm gonna ask Ryan Clark. If you're willing to come in, you could stay in my hotel room. Like it was all about taking advantage of these opportunities, because it was the opportunities were they weren't readily available, but when they were, you had to jump on them.
Yeah, you didn't have control of it. Whatever you got, you had to take advantage of. But you couldn't make your own schedule or make your own stakes.
Yeah, and so like my wife would always she'd wonder like why if I would work all day, come home, and I would be on the phone or doing. I would be up all night, because like if you weren't doing all of that, you had to work on that schedule, because like that was the schedule that they were on, and you had to adjust to their schedule, because it's like, well, we can only do this at this. Okay, no problem. And then you're just chasing people down, and you may be calling anybody. I mean, it was hard sometimes to find guys. Other times it was easy to find guys.
Did you find that when you got the access and they came and they covered it and the riders came to them, that the riders were pretty good and the media respected them and thought they were fairly well spoken, and also what they did was cool?
The best thing that Supercross had going was anybody comes out to do a story, they will never not enjoy, appreciate. It's never a bad. You're not.
Really?
You're not.
Once you got them, you had them.
Yeah, you had them hook, line, and sinker.
Really?
And when I would always make it a point, when there would be a print journalist, to take them from the press box and bring them down to the floor, because there really is nothing. There's nothing similar to what happens down there. I mean, it's crazy. As much as I did that crap for I shouldn't say crap. I did that for 18 years, and I rarely went down to the floor because I was scared. Like, I don't know when these guys hit me.
I agree, and I'm going to talk to you about these dumb photographers in a second. But yes, when you're down on the floor, when they're hammering laps, you're like, oh my god, it's
real stuff, and like. It's a spectacle, man. What those guys are doing, and it's nothing compares to it. And I can say that coming from someone that's been around every sport. I've done it. I've played every sport. I've done every sport, and what these guys do is spectacular.
Okay, yeah. So great transition there, accidentally on your part. If you're down on the floor and you're seeing these top dudes ride, when you see how high the jumps are, how fast they're going, how hard they're pounding it. Look, I've been around this sport my entire life, and I'm still like, whoa, this is a little bit sketch. So you were also, while you're getting these mainstream media people to sign on and give you coverage, dealing with all these idiots within our sport who are like, I want to be a photographer, I want to be a journalist, I want to be a blogger. And they always complain every week that 10% of the floor is open for photos and the other 90% is redded out. If any of those dudes claim that they know exactly what they're doing down there and they're not going to get hurt and it's not sketchy and it's not gnarly, they're lying to themselves. That floor is crazy. When I've only been there during qualifying. I've never been down there during a race because I've got to announce or type. It's insane when they're out there on the track.
Yep. I would say that first of all, the biggest distribution outlet for photos is the Associated Press.
Right. In the world, you mean?
Yes.
Not in our industry, but
in the world. And the sport was lucky enough to have a handful of AP photographers at those things.
Yeah.
Not one of them ever wanted to shoot on the floor.
They didn't want to.
Not a single photographer wanted to shoot on the floor from USA Today.
They did. You offered them. They didn't want it.
Correct. Gary Bogdan, who is he's a freelancer, but he shot the cover of Sports Illustrated for every Kentucky Derby, the NCAA sports, everything. He's a friend of mine. You know, like he told me the floor is not the spot where you want to be to shoot these photos.
Interesting.
Now, I'm sure Simon Cudby and people can call me up and argue. I'm sure you can get good stuff, but if you need to make a story for an outlet, you're going to be fine taking photos from somewhere else. Now, if you want to be on the floor as a fan, that's a huge difference.
Right, so what percentage of your job was warding those people off? The dudes who wanted to break in, I'm a freelancer, I'm looking for a job, I want a free ticket, I want a free pass, I want access. There was a huge other part of your job that was that.
Yeah, I'm from Chicago. I like the Chicago Bears. I'd probably like to go down to Soldier Field every Sunday and watch the game from the sidelines.
You wouldn't, yeah.
But I'm not going to sit there and bullshit people and tell them I'm a blogger, I'm a photographer, I'm this, I'm an influencer.
It's podcaster now.
No, yeah. So you pay respect to the people that put in the hard work and the real journalists, and you don't detour these. You're muddying the water for the guys that have put in the time to. Now, I will tell these guys, these young kids that want to come up and they want to make something of themselves, go to Feld or whoever and say, listen, I'm a photographer.
Yeah.
Here's my distribution. Here's my reach. Yeah. Here's what I'm planning to do. And unfortunately, even giving over your photos to them doesn't mean shit anymore. So you need to provide value. Yeah. You just can't. Just because you're Bob, ILoveMX.com doesn't mean you're, it's not a rite of passage. Go out there, provide some value.
Right.
And, or have the guy apply for a credential to the Super Bowl.
Oh, my God.
And work backwards to see how it'd be to get a credential at Supercross.
Would you look at dealing with endemic media like us as nothing more than a complete pain in the ass while you're trying to get these local KTLA to get Chad Reed up there in the limo?
Well, you guys know, when I did that, I didn't have to deal with you guys. You guys know more than I did. I didn't have to deal with you guys, really.
Well, no, I guess not, but I don't know on the photography side or just getting a credential or whatever.
I guess when you guys are endemic media.
Yes, we are endemic media.
The fan media was I'm not a police officer.
Okay.
So, I didn't like dealing with those guys that were it just took up a lot of extra time.
Well, yeah, and you had other things you're working on, the non-endemic media, which your bosses probably feel is way more important than some rando photographer getting on the floor.
I've never had my bosses that when I did that job say, "Good job by getting that photographer there."
Yes, exactly. It's probably worse.
I'll tell you a funny story. I went to Shav Glick, who was the motorsports guy at the LA Times. Yeah. Highly respected guy, great guy. And I had been trying to figure out a way we can get Supercross on the AP wire every week and do all this stuff. And Shav was in his 80s.
Okay.
He didn't owe me anything. He told me, he said, hey, drive to the Indianapolis 500. I'm going to take you through the media room. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to take you golfing with Mike Harris. Now, Mike Harris at the time was the motorsports editor at the AP.
Okay.
And I'm like, why is this guy? I'm nobody. Why is this guy doing this for me? Which was awesome. And so we go down there, we do all this stuff, and we leave the golf course. It was an awesome day, and Shav was taking me around, and it was a really cool experience. I'm very grateful for it. And I was able to set up a system where we can send in results, and I would write a story, and the AP would run that story.
Okay.
But I was able to get Mike Harris to do a story on James Stewart.
Okay.
Now, at that time, newspapers were huge.
Yeah.
So this story goes out, and it was Ken Hudgens, who was our VP of probably marketing at the time, it got delivered to his doorstep. He'd never had a Supercross story delivered to his doorstep.
Yeah.
Now, it was either Live Nation or Clear Channel that owned us at the time.
Yeah.
The CEO had that story delivered to his doorstep.
All right.
And,
good job, Denny.
Well,
one time.
It was...
One time.
They did a bunch of them down the road.
Okay.
But as time went on, the newspaper novelty kind of ran away, as we know. Well, it was funny at how big that one story was, and the people that owned us were like, I can't believe you guys are in the newspaper. And I'm like, to me, I'm like, no, we're in this all the time. This one story and the AP deal had such a massive reach. And my point to telling the story is that some of these photographers that want to jump on this, get on the floor, do all this stuff, you got to have reach. You got to have some reason for the people at Feld to say, I want you at my race because you are going to do X, Y, and Z.
The reason I ask is because the photographers who are always mad about not getting their free ticket or their ability to stand right next to the whoops when the riders are going through them at 30 miles an hour, and I don't care what they say, it's scary. Their point would be like, yeah, big deal, you got AP or you got LA Times or you got Morning Show. Is that really bringing anyone to the race? Did you have any metrics or even just a sixth sense of, okay, not everybody who watched KTLA at 9 a.m. was coming to Anaheim, but do you have a general idea of what it meant for the sport?
Sure. I think, I would always do ad equivalency, and I would have impressions and reach and all of that stuff that I could prove, and there weren't conversions on how many people picked up the phone and said, I want to buy a ticket, because seeing that, but we're putting that sport, that event, the activity in front of an audience that was getting ready for work, that has 2 10-year-old boys that like doing boy stuff, and it was affordable. So let's go check this out. Maybe their neighbor rode dirt bikes. So it was definitely, anytime you broaden the reach or you extend it, I think, to a different audience, it's going to be huge. And that's what we always, my head was on the line to get that stuff. And, we worked hard to find different avenues, and it was a constant, because, I would tell you, if I got you to write a story on how great Chad Reed was, I'm not going to get a pat on the back. I'm not going to get a pat on the back for much. But there's not a whole lot that, you had to really think outside the box and just be searching and scrapping and kind of finding new avenues to bring in fans. And the good thing is it's to convince someone to become a diehard is a little bit much. But you go watch one of these things on a Saturday night and you spend whatever it costs. It's unlike anything you've ever seen before.
So, look, during the 18 years we were there, Supercross went from niche to selling out stadiums. It really grew. And I know you're not the type of guy that's going to pat yourself on the back, and you're saying your bosses didn't pat you on the back either. But do you think, without having metrics to measure it, some of the things you did have that impact?
Maybe, but this is Dave Prater ran the show. He made sure everything was good. Yeah. The guys that AMA ran a good, safe race. Everybody contributed. Yeah. And if I was in charge of putting this stuff in front of a new set of eyeballs, I think I tried my best. And if it, and I know I did whatever I could, and I used different avenues and included different people that I knew to maybe spread the wings and to bring in a new audience. So that's what I think my contribution was.
But what year did you start as PR guy? 2000.
So I worked there for a while in different roles, but I think my first year was 2000 or 2001.
Dude, the difference in 2001 and when you left, which is halfway through 15?
16,
is massive. The growth that Supercross had from 2000 to 2010, for example, is huge.
Yeah, but I would tell you, I'm just a little part. They paid me to do one job, and I know that I know I tried my ass off, and I busted my ass to do my contribution. I would tell the team that I worked with, anyone that reported to me or was on my team, I would say, listen, when this shit ends, you have to look in the mirror and go, if we didn't sell enough tickets or if the event sucked, did you do your part? And if you can't do that, then honestly, and there were metrics.
But if you can say that.
Well, you never could do enough. You could never be on enough TV.
Sure.
So I would tell, and to your point about metrics, when we would meet and then we turn our reports at the end of the events, I would tell these guys, listen, we have to own our keep. So if we're not on every TV station once, in both of the one or two of the newspapers, whatever, like there was some baseline shit and that stuff I know is not normal with most most companies that do this stuff. And so
you could just tell your bosses, hey man, we're a small sport. I'm sorry, I couldn't get you anything.
That was never an option. Never, ever an option. And it's not. And I'm really glad that I worked under that type of. I'm glad now that I worked under that environment because when I work at my job now and our president tells me certain things, I'm like, it sounds really dumb, but I tell him, I'm like, this is just what I know. I know to turn over every stone. That's good. Work every angle, leverage every relationship. I don't I just know one thing. And it sounds maybe a little no, I get it. It forces you to have a certain work ethic and high standards and never truly feel like you've arrived. Yeah, I never would whatever I get. I mean, I'll still never be happy with stuff. I mean, I'm always going to be that way. I was that way my whole life in sports and whatever. Right. If you start getting comfortable, you're gonna get comfortable. Well, I remember you telling me way back that you almost saw, to motivate yourself, getting media and getting people to buy into something they probably weren't interested in was almost like a sport, almost like a game. Can I get them to want to cover something that they maybe didn't want to? And it was motivating yourself like winning a match or winning a game. Yeah. Can I get them to do something that they originally didn't want to do? Yeah, and I don't feel myself as a salesperson, but I was bringing them to get engaged with something that was great. I mean, this is a unique... I'm not bringing them to a basketball game. And we've been talking, I grew up wrestling. Yep. It's hard to take someone to a wrestling match unless they know about it. Yeah. And it's one of those things where, if you can't watch this and find something that you're like, holy shit, this is crazy. Yeah. And as guys like yourself and me who know the deeper layers, you're like, oh my God, these guys are the regular fan doesn't sit in the stands and go, yeah, that guy crashed, it looked like it hurt. As much pain as that guy's in, he can't wait to get back on it. It is different, and I try to explain that to my wife all the time. All right, my last thing is, it was as crazy as it probably seemed when you were doing it. Photographers wanted in, you're trying to pitch a local media. Now we have this whole we have bloggers, we have podcasters, we have social media people. How do you possibly figure out, at least then you were like, if I could get in the newspaper, I'm doing my job. If I could get on the local morning show, I'm doing my job. No one truly knows media these days. We're all taking guesses. How do you know what the hell to do now? The good thing with today's media, and some people may argue this, is that everything is metric driven. Okay. So you have analytics, you have insights on all the social channels, you have, I'm sure this podcast, maybe one person will listen to it. Yep. But I think if you have data that supports how relevant you are, and you're not just some random guy. I mean, look at a guy like Joe Rogan. Okay. The guy was a television personality, and he kind of fell into that. So his podcast is huge. So you'd never argue his numbers. Yes. You'd want him to come cover Supercross. So if you make a case that we want you to be there, you want to always be the person. And I used to tell people this when they'd ask me for knothole club passes. Yeah. And I go, listen, here's how the knothole works. Okay. I still don't know. So I haven't been there either. You haven't been there either. My first answer is that the safest answer is I don't control those passes. Nicely done. Now, if I was if I wanted someone to be in there, I can get them in there.
Yeah, but you would never say this publicly.
Now, you're correct. Well, now if I would tell other people, if you are supposed to be in the knot hole, we're knocking on your door. That's how that works.
Nice.
So, when Pamela Anderson would come to the races, Drew Barrymore, they weren't going around 15. Like, it was So, if you want to be somewhere, you'll get there. Naturally. So, if you want to bring value to the sport, bring the value, and you'll be there.
I get that, but at the same time, before you were like, I got to get USA Today, I got to get LA Times, or whatever. Now there might be some blogger with 5 million followers who's better than that. How do you decide where to put your eggs?
Correct.
In what basket?
Well, here's a good example I use nowadays, and we'll kind of put into focus the state of media that we're in.
Yes. Thank you. Help me.
If we had the New York Times willing to write a front page story on Supercross coming to MetLife Stadium, or Floyd Mayweather standing on the Supercross field and making a video of Chad Reed riding around the track, you're going to go with Floyd Mayweather.
That is unbelievable.
Because it's just, the numbers make sense.
You're right.
Back in the day, back in the day, you've stayed in as many hotels as I have. You get USA Today under your hotel room.
Yeah.
How many people read every page? You know how many people how many people engage with social. You have all of that stuff. Billboards, the traditional media is a little bit, it's changed. This stuff is
It doesn't have the metrics.
This is more, it's more surgical. And trust me, I think it's crazy where it's gone, but it's where we're at, and there are quantifiable metrics that you could use to analyze it.
When you look at trying to get Villapoto and Jimmy Johnson or whoever else gets involved in this pit bike race, then is that part of it? Or you look at, because I feel like the Supercross guys are actually pretty good on social media, especially Instagram. So is that part of the way you can justify this? If I get this guy, and this guy, these three riders, if I get Chad Reed, Ken Robinson, and Ryan Villapoto weigh in on this, and Jimmy Johnson, I've gotten you some metrics.
Unfortunately, it will justify and likely surpass the numbers our advertising budget.
Well, unfortunately for them, but fortunately for you.
Correct. Yeah. It's I'm how that whole pit bike thing came, because the conversation started. We were kind of thrown into it, and to get a guy like Ryan, who was pulling teeth to get to do a lot of stuff.
I love this. When he was a professional athlete racer,
right? And now he's like, let's do this. And every time the numbers on that social post, I'm getting texts from him. He's updating me as if he's
updating you.
Yeah, he's telling me and I'm like, you have no idea. I'm at this new place of employment, not new, but I'm trying to do a good job to do my part. I'm watching these numbers like a hawk because I have someone to answer to and justify that we're doing this event. And so you don't really need to update me, Ryan. I've got this.
Yes.
And he was just as much on board with it, and he's got his ideas, and I hope I could work, we could do more stuff like this all the time, and I'm excited to see where it's going to go and what's going to come of it.
I'm glad that now that you've stepped away, you are still able to get the same feeling that we all have is, damn, if this Ryan Villapoto was around 5 years ago, this would have been a lot easier. Because that's the way every single one of us still in the sport feels. This Ryan Villapoto is amazing.
I almost wish that, and I actually thought about this when I was there at some point, is to have a guy because Carmichael, at the end of his career, he really came around in doing all of the right stuff.
Yeah.
And I think once he went over to NASCAR, he had a heightened sense of how important this stuff was. And when it might be a good idea at some point to have Villapoto, Carmichael, and all those guys, maybe they all sit these guys down in a room, and I think all these young kids, the up and comers, I think they'd all listen to them and just say, you know, when the spotlight goes away, there's one thing. Like when the money's not coming, and that's one thing.
Yeah.
And it's important to encourage these kids to be smart, fiscally responsible, but also when they have this opportunity to take advantage of this and everything they've been given, do all that, and maximize this little window that like you can do so much, and because when it's done. Like, where's Trey Kennard? He's the nicest guy in the world. I don't even know what, and I don't even follow the sport really anymore. I mean,
no, I know what you mean. You would think the money's going to go away and that's going to hurt. But these dudes who didn't even seem interested in being famous or having spotlight or having attention, after about 2 years when they don't have it anymore, even they start to miss it. And these are dudes, some guys are wired that way. I feel like McGrath or Emig, certain guys like being famous. I don't think Villapoto necessarily liked being famous, but after about 2 years, he started to miss it also.
Well, yeah, these dudes come running into Anaheim 1 with the gloves on their hand, hoods. It looked like bank robbers coming into the pits trying to avoid everybody.
Yes. Yeah.
And now all of a sudden it's like, hey, give me a hug. Like, give me something, man. I just want a little bit of love. And I think that's important because, you know, we all learn stuff growing up. So it's probably something that they fall into, and maybe they don't realize it. But if they have someone that's gone through it that can serve that knowledge backwards, I think it would be important for them to be able to share that with some of these young guys. Like, hey, get out there, make something of yourself. And I'll say, these guys do a better job than most of making themselves relevant, but you could never do enough.
That's really what it comes down to, and that's how I started this, and that's how I'll end it. Do not bag on the riders. I feel like for their age and for the amount of time they have, they do an excellent job. And you cannot blame the fact that we're not more popular than the Super Bowl, like the San Diego Supercross this weekend will not be. I'm just saying it right now. Sorry, you tried. It will not be as popular as the Super Bowl this weekend. You cannot put that all on the athletes. No. It just is what it is.
No, they do their part. And another thing, real quick, I'll make one last comment, is that, you know, with racing in any form, it's a hard thing for people to understand, because with the stick and ball stuff, you get it by law, probably, you get introduced to all of the stick and ball stuff through the academic curriculum. You're doing all of that stuff in gym class. You're doing so. And as you grow up, those sports, they're always like those are the guys that you want to emulate. And you want to, I want to be the next Deion Sanders, and you want to do all these things. And so it's easier to go down that path because all your friends go down that path. And then it's like, okay, I have someone that's got a little bit of money. They do this other sport, and that's one segment of racing. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, wait, that's all right. The freestyle, no, that's the crotch rocket racing. Those are the guys that
we're getting very
run
specific,
around, and it gets the water gets muddy where there's only one baseball, and so like
we've literally, all of us have played baseball, basketball, football, soccer at one point in our lives. We all have held a basketball,
male and female. So,
but how many people have ridden a dirt bike?
Exactly. So you kind of have to look at it from that perspective, that you're at a disadvantage from the participant standpoint, that those guys, how many people can do that? How many people even have the balls to get on a motorcycle and do that shit?
Well, I don't know how often you throw it out there. With the limited NASCAR stuff I did, whenever I told people I normally do motocross and supercross coverage, it always gets respect. It always gets respect. They might not follow it week in and week out, but no one ever said that shit's lame.
It's those guys probably are the best people to endorse it, because
they know it's
they
badass.
Get it.
Yeah.
And like I remember Ricky Carmichael telling me one time that he crashed his truck.
Yeah.
And like he said, it was so loud, and like for him to say something was like that was like scary. I'm like, okay, like I've been at a rock concert and it was loud. Like
this dude could have broken his neck every single day of his life for 12 years. Yeah.
So like for what those guys go through, and to translate that information back to the Supercross guys, they're good people to endorse the stuff.
Okay, that's our conversation with Denny. As always, thanks to our sponsor, Yoshimura, 65 years of four-stroke research and development. Check them out at yoshimura-rd.com, or just check out the factory JGR Yoshimura Suzukis. Check out the factory HRC Hondas. Check out the Geico Hondas. Lots of Yoshimura out there in the pits on the podium. Ken Roxon will be rocking the red plate with the Yoshimura exhaust right behind the side plate of that red plate this weekend in Dallas. So I'll see you there. We'll be in Dallas. Hang out with us before the race in Denver. Maybe Indy, maybe Seattle. I think we have Vegas locked in as well. Go to theorienttheater.com to buy tickets, or just go to Steve Mathis's JankyPulpMX.com site, and you can get tickets for our live Denver show right now. And check out RacerXBrand.com and go to RacerXOnline.com/subscribe to be ready for the next issue of Racer X Illustrated, which is coming your way soon. It is going to be awesome, and I've got to get to work on it. So I'm done. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to the Racer X Exhaust Podcast.